Everything you need to know about boring, vanilla buy-to-let properties. Let's start with the most important, location. I'm not talking about the show, I'm talking about the logistics of where you are going to invest in property. Now you might be asking, well, why is that the most important? Well, it has something to do with capital appreciation or capital growth or inflation at play, whatever you want to call it. So essentially, we've got supply versus demand. Inflation is obviously the erosion of money, but basically it also increases the value of properties, okay? Or everything really, but property specifically. And then you've got on top of inflation the fact there's way too much demand in the UK versus supply. But is that strictly true? Well, if you take it as a broad stroke, there's 1 million properties in the UK that have demand for them, but they don't exist, i.e. there is a 1 million housing unit shortage. What? That's absolutely crazy, right? But what that creates is a deficit between demand and supply, and therefore prices go up. But that's not all over the UK. You have to find specific locations. Now, look, any logical place like London, Birmingham, Nottingham, Leeds, Newcastle, Liverpool, Manchester, other places apply. You can invest in, and over the long term, they will go up. But the reason location is so important is it's trying to predict the long-term nature of investments. And an easy way of doing this is the north-south divide. Almost definitely over the next 50 years, the north will prosper way more than the south, simply because of the tapped out market level, okay? So we're not going to go into the economics of that, but let's place a 50-year bet and we'll see who wins in the next 50 years, right? So we're going to narrow it down to the northern belt, and then you're going to really decide where you want to invest. For me, it's going to be in West and South Yorkshire. I personally think at least over the next 10 years, it has the best growth prospects out of any other area of the UK. And I think over the next 50 years, it's really hard to tell, but I believe it will place in the top 4 locations. Now, the truth is, you have to do your own research. So what I'm looking for here is I'm looking at schools, I'm looking at infrastructure, I'm looking at average EPC levels, I'm looking at mortgage favourability, I'm looking at Article 4 areas, I'm looking at development prospects, I'm looking at the train lines that are going in, and so much more. Different supply versus demand levels. We're looking at how much the average person is earning in that location versus the average purchase price. I'm looking at the social demographic breakdown. I'm looking at the tenure of property. If it's breaking down at 30% owned outright, 30% owner-occupier with a mortgage, 21% private rental and 19% social housing, I know it's going to break down. By the way, I know I've just said a lot there. You can go back and watch it again if you want. But all of those things are determining factors to if we're going to choose the right location. And then, of course, we need to understand the best property type. In order to understand the best property type, you need to understand your tenant type. Now, in general, I do not touch leasehold properties, but let me caveat that. If I lived in central London, for example, where almost everything is a leasehold because they're all flats, that's a bit of a different conversation. So there's my caveat. But if you are in a location that has an abundance of houses and flats, I would never buy a flat unless I were building or developing or owning the entire block of apartments, okay? And the reason for that is I want to own the freehold, which means I own the heavens above and the hells below. Basically, you own the ground that it's on, whereas with a leasehold, you own that particular unit, but you don't own anything around it. And that's just a complete lack of control, considering I'm going to put over £100,000 into this individual asset. Now, in general, what I'm looking to do is focus on families. I'm looking to have long-term tenants, protected tenants that are going to be going to good schools. So I'm going to go for 2 to 4 bed freehold houses. That's the most typical demand in my area, which is West and South Yorkshire, okay? But you can't just get any location in West and South Yorkshire. It has to fit the demand curve. It has to fit the social demographic. It has to fit the earnings and so much more. Now, one tip I will give at this point is you are not living in the property. Now, if you're watching this and you're a southerner like me, I came up from London, and when I got here, sorry if you're northern by the way, I honestly thought I'd walked onto a set of Coronation Street. It's pretty intense. It's very much like rows and rows of terrace houses. You've got areas with bloody barred gates, bars on the window, and I thought, bloody hell, this must be a really rough area. They don't have gardens. There's a lot of back-to-back properties up north, which is less common down south in Kent, for example. But there's no back gardens in a lot of areas, all of this sort of thing. but you're not living there. What you need to understand is what people in that area see as the norm for them. For me, I'm just making sure that it's a good social demographic breakdown area, making sure there's good earnings, and really I'm targeting areas that had good or outstanding schools to make sure I'm attracting long-term family tenants in there. Next is understanding your budgets and setting realistic budgets. This is one of the key things that people really miss things out. So in the purchase, people don't factor in things like the accurate stamp duty, the right fees that they're going to pay, the legal fees, the broker fees, the survey fee, the disbursements that you're going to pay on the legal fees. The refurbishment is almost always wrong with property investors. How are you going to manage the refurbishment? Because most people that invest in Yorkshire, they're outside investors from London, Hong Kong, pumping it in there because they know the long-term growth aspects. And this is really difficult. And the thing with property is, if you get it right, it has the opportunity to make you a lot of money. A lot of money. We found out actually over a 10-year period, we over double somebody's investment. How cool is that? We actually worked that out last week, by the way. So somebody that invests for us for 10 years, it's their own portfolio in our locations using that now. Is that a guarantee for the future? No, of course. But we over double their money in 10 years because we've got the accuracy on these numbers. Now, just make sure you're factoring them in. Top tips on this is almost definitely people get the refurbs wrong. They don't take account of their purchasing fees, and they don't take account of things like insurance, management fees, and maintenance and things like that in their purchase, which is really important. Now, if you're getting it right, you don't need to be over the top. Like you see people going 15% for voids and maintenance. That's crazy. A simple 5% contingency, if you're doing things right at the beginning, will be perfect. Now, you might be listening to this, by the way, and thinking, bloody hell, this is a lot of work, but you have no bloody idea. You need to assess the criteria, analyze the areas, make sure the property types are right, make sure the tenant types are right, source the property, negotiate it in a great area. All properties are selling above the market value in the best areas. Negotiating a market value price is harder than you think. Then, of course, you need to get it through legals, which is about 18 different stages of legals. Then your finance, then your refurbishment, then your management company, and everything in between. By the way, if you're watching this, you're thinking, brilliant. I thought I wanted to buy buy-to-let, but that sounds like a lot of effort. Well, that's cool. That's where we come in, okay? So one of my companies, Aspire Property Group, we help investors just like you build your portfolio. So you own the properties, you get all the capital growth, you get all the rental. There's no catch there, by the way. It's our business. That's what we do. Now, typically, we work with investors that have 100,000 or more, but if you've got just 50,000, then that's enough to get one property. But typically, we want to build portfolios for people. So if you've got 50, 100 or more to invest, you want to get your money working hard for you, but you don't know how to do it, then put APG, that's for Aspire Property Group, APG in the comments now, or I'll put a link in the description. I'll pin it to the top. Fill in your details and you can have a one-to-one consultation session with one of my team. And if we feel it's right for you, we will start helping you build your portfolio. You thought it was over, right? Nope. You've then got section 4, which is the legals. Now, there's a lot of legals when it comes to property. Let me see if I can just remember as many as possible. First of all, you need to make sure it's got an EPC on the property. Any property in the UK that's getting sold or rented needs to have an EPC, which is an Energy Performance Certificate. And in order to rent in the UK, it's got to be an EPC-E in order to be legal. Really important, by the way. That doesn't mean go away from anything with an EPC-F. It just needs to be upgradable, and you need to understand the cost of that. You also need to make sure that when you own the property, you've got insurance, and that's from when you exchange on landlord insurance and property insurance, because you are legally liable for that property. You also, if you're going to rent it out, you need to get a CP12, which is a gas safety certificate, an EICR, which is an electrical certificate, and that's to make sure that it's actually pragmatic for somebody to move into. You also need to do your health and safety checks on the property. For example, if there's something loose and a tenant falls over that, and you've not done a check before, that could be on you. And then there's over 100 pieces of regulation through managing a property, which I'll go through now one by one. No, I won't. There's a lot of stuff that needs to go in there. So even, for example, legally renting them, making sure they've got the right to let, making sure they've got a house renting guide, and everything else that comes there. And you must get proof that you've issued that when signing the AST, AST, which is the Assured Short Hold Tenancy. Otherwise, if they stop paying, you can't legally evict them, and it becomes very, very difficult, and your asset becomes a liability. And the reason I mention this, by the way, is you can look at all of this, do your own rental checks. People self-manage all the time, and if you've got the time and experience, you can definitely get it done. But the fact that you're watching this video maybe shows that you actually need the essentials delivered by somebody else. And by the way, when I say our company APG does that, and yes, I'm doing a little bit of a cheeky plug again, is we don't just find the right investment. We look after you and create a 20, 30-year vision of working together, and we do the end-to-end process. We find the deal, negotiate it. By the way, we're not going crazy discounts. We get amazing properties. That's our game. Long-term, generational wealth. Get it through legals. Get the best broker that we've got available for you. We manage the refurbishment, and we've got in-house management of your property, so you've got a one-stop shop for absolutely everything. And as I said, if that sounds like something you might be interested in, less stress, put APG in the comments now or click the link and we can book a one-to-one call. Final tips I'm going to give when there is a tenant is know your tenants right. They have the right to something called quiet enjoyment, okay? Basically, when you've got a tenant in your property, yes, it is your house, you own it, but it's also their home. And it's really important you understand that, because a lot of investors that I've worked with in the past, when I didn't do management myself, and one of the reasons I brought in, is people started to think that you've got these automatic rights, like show your mates around the property, turn up and knock on the door just to see how the tenant's getting on. And you might think that's fair enough. No, it's not. You are in breach there. You need to be really careful. Honestly, property management out of all of it is the heaviest part of regulation. It really is. There's over 100 things, and there's new things coming out all the time with health and safety, Section 21, Section 8, right to lets, your checks, your referencing, and so much more. So I'm not saying you need to use somebody like Aspire, but make sure at the minimum you are subscribing to YouTube channels like mine. And by the way, if you're not subscribed already, hit the subscribe and the notification bell. Make sure you are as informed as you possibly can. Look, I'm in this every single day, and the main reason why I'm doing this channel is to feed through everything that I'm learning. Do I know everything? No, I don't. But as I'm learning and developing, I want to share as much of that as possible. But if you are watching this, you love learning, but you're like, do you know what? It's eroding in my bank account. I need to get my money working for me whilst I'm learning to do all this myself. That's where I can come in. Do not screw up your first couple of properties. It's the foundation of your generational wealth. If you want to get into that, take action now. Put APG in the comments. Spaces are limited. We can only work with a few investors at a time, but if we feel it's right for you and you're right for our service, we'll take you on. So APG, or fill in your details at the link and we'll book in a one-to-one consultation session. Make sure to hit the subscribe and the notification bell, and if you could tap that like button and end up watching this video.